I want to keep pushing the envelope and keep getting bigger. And the one that we've got going right now is my biggest one ever. And it's kind of intimidating, but I am excited as hell by it, because this to me is this perfect example of this is what Kickstarters and crowdfunding can do for an author. I am able to get this is my favorite fantasy trilogy. I get it out the way I've always wanted it to be, because it never came out the way I wanted it to be before.
And this was a previously published trilogy that you did traditionally, right? That you're now republishing through Kickstarter. Did you get the rights? I'm assuming you got the rights back to that, but like, how did that? When was the series originally published?
So it's called the Terra Incognita Fantasy Trilogy. This is it was published a dozen years ago and only in paperback by a trad publisher. And this is a series that I had the idea for it when I was in college, and it had been just sort of percolating in my brain for decades. And then when I actually decided to work on it, I spent about 15 years doing research. This is sailing ships and sea monsters and the Crusades and the Age of Discovery, and it's this it's Game of Thrones only finished, is what that kind of big huge
Take that, Martin.
lots of characters, lots of huge landscapes, and it's just this really big story, just really powerful, and I really wanted it to be done and released right. And at the time when it came out, we talked a little bit about my relationship with Neil Peart from Rush. And so I hang around with a lot of rock stars. I know, I'm kind of in the music industry. I don't play anything myself, but I love rock music, and I've been connected with them for a long time. And I wrote the novel with Neil Peart of the last studio album that Rush did, called Clockwork Angels. They did this concept album. I wrote the novel and album tied together. I've always thought that music and words has this intimate connection. And when I was writing the Terra Incognita stuff, I always wanted to do the same thing. I wanted a companion rock concept album to come out at the same time as the book did. Because of my own connections in the music industry, I had a guy who owned a rock record label who wanted to work with me. He wanted to do a Terra Incognita rock album. And so Rebecca and I wrote the lyrics to it, and he went out and got like my rock idols to perform on it. And he got Steve Walsh, the singer from Kansas, who did Carry On Wayward Son. He got James LaBrie from Dream Theater. He got Michael Sadler from Saga. He got John Payne from Asia. He got Sass Jordan, a big name female Canadian vocalist. And we got the violinist from Kansas who played Dust in the Wind. And I mean, all these rock star people that are performing on this rock album. That's the Terra Incognita album that goes with book one in the series. And then, so that came out, and then we did a rock album that went with book two of the series. And it was just kind of frustrating to me, because the trad publisher just flat out refused to do any cross promotion. They didn't mention at all that there was a rock album connected to this book. We got all kinds of press in the music industry, but the publisher wouldn't. And there's also a soundtrack to it that you can listen to. So those books kind of came out, and then after a few years, you couldn't buy them anywhere, and they were hard to get, and thus began a 2-year process for me to get the rights back so I could publish them myself. And that's another whole hour-long podcast about why don't they just give the rights back if they're not publishing them. But I got the rights back. They gave me the rights back.
So you have them back now, and then do you also have the rights to the albums?
And I got the rights to the albums.
Wow.
And at last, I have another record producer friend who has been bugging me for a couple of years saying, Kevin, why don't you do the third Terra Incognita CD? And I go, well, because the other ones are out of print and the books didn't come out very well. But I got the rights back. And so I contacted him more than a year ago. I said, okay, Bob, we're on. You want to do this third CD? So we have now recorded the third Terra Incognita rock CD. I got the rights back to the first two. I got the rights back to the books, which had never been published in hardcover before. And so that's what this campaign is right now. Oh, and I got the audiobook rights back. And my narrator is Scott Brick, big audiobook award-winning narrator. He does all my Dune books with Brian Herbert. And so he has rebuilt and redone the unabridged audiobooks, which is like 60 hours of audiobook, which is all done. And so this Kickstarter, so the third rock CD, we've got Michael Sadler from Saga on it again. We've got Jonathan Dinklage, who's the violinist from Rush's Clockwork Angels, who's on it. We got Ed Toth, the drummer from the Doobie Brothers. We got Don Perry from Jethro Tull. We've got Greg Bissonette, who's the drummer for the David Lee Roth band. So it's like all these rock star friends. And again, we wrote the lyrics. And just last weekend, I went out to Sacramento to the record studio, and we had a big listening party with a bunch of the band members coming in. And so we've got all 3 rock CDs, and the books themselves. I was never super thrilled with the original cover design. So I've got the cover paintings. They're brand new designs, that big sea serpents on the cover instead of kind of text blocks and things. So these are nice new hardcover jacketed editions. There's all 3 CDs. There's all 3 audiobooks. And this is the big thing that I'm pushing the envelope. This is the first time that I'm doing the fancy leatherette bound, gold embossed, slipcase, numbered end papers. So that sets, you can get the fancy edition and the 3 CDs and everything. So this, now I got to confess to you, this one has to be my biggest one ever, because I've spent quite a lot of money to get all this stuff prepared. You know, it's not cheap to record a rock CD, and it's not cheap to do these leatherette editions and slipcases and things, but it just feels so good to me, because when I get the images back, and because we're fascinating you on this podcast, I hope you'll at least go to Kickstarter and just look up my name, Kevin J. Anderson, or look up Terra Incognita, and you'll see it. Just the pictures, the sea serpent art, and the beautiful dust jacket covers, and the leatherette editions, and the rock CDs. This is like the way I want this series to be. I've spent so much of my life producing these books and writing them, that this is, you know, this is the fine, fancy way that writers always want their books to look like. And of course there's ebooks too, and you know, digital downloads of the CDs and everything. But I know Damon, you've been wanting to get the ebooks of this trilogy for a long time, but they've been just impossible to find.
Yeah, I have signed paperbacks that you sent to me, which are wonderful, and they're beautiful, and they're sitting on my shelf. But I read in ebooks, right, in the BookFunnel app. So I that's how I read all my books. But I will say, like, you have a lot of there's a lot of crossover here, because Kevin J. Anderson fans who probably, like some like me, never read this series, right? Didn't read it when it came out. But hey, there's a Kevin J. Anderson fantasy series. Yeah, I'm in. I'll take it. 2, you have the people who did read the series but never got a beautiful edition, never got to hear the 3rd rock album, maybe didn't even know that apparently that the rock albums existed, because the publisher wasn't giving you any play on that. And then you have all the people that are just, they're like, oh, hey, cool, I love fantasy. Here's a whole trilogy. I know for me, like, that's a big selling point, right? It's like, we've been burned, if you're in the fantasy readership, we've been burned enough times by, you know, the Rothuses and the Martins of the world, that you don't get, you're never going to get the end of the series that you love so much. And so knowing that, hey, if you back this Kickstarter, even if you just want the ebooks, you get the whole thing. It's a trilogy and it's done. There's not a 4th book that's never coming. It's done. So I think you have a lot of things going for this campaign. I'm really excited to see how it's going to do. I love I'm backing the bespoke, you know, hardcover editions, because I think those are cool. And you're doing signed editions? Yes, that was because that's kind of part of it.
One, the fancy slipcase one will only be signed,
right?
Like limiting it to, I don't know the number yet, because we'll see what the Kickstarter does. But I know I'm going to have to decide before. I think it's going to be limited to 500 copies or maybe 1,000. But every one of them will be signed and numbered. There won't be just the throwaway, oh, here's a leftover slipcase set. They're only going to be numbered and limited.
Which I will say, I've seen that trend in authors doing Kickstarters lately, where they will do, so they, you know, I mean, you have, when you order books, especially the bespoke books, especially if you're doing larger numbers and you're printing through Chinese printers and having them shipped or whatever, there are minimum order numbers that you have to make. What I have seen is authors that were doing like the first 200 are numbered. And then the rest of the print run is still the same book, but it's not one of the early numbered editions. So I'm not going to write up to 1,000 numbers in every one, but the first 200 are numbered. So there is a little bit of that, fear of missing out. Like, oh no, you better back it quick because only the first 200 get the numbered print run, and then everything else, you're still getting everything else about the exact same book. But the biggest fans, they want those numbered editions. They want to have the number that says, number 5.
And they want the early numbers too. So I'm going to have
exactly.
I'm not going to specifically assign them, but it's pretty much going to be in the order of when they backed. So if you were one of the first backers, you'll get one of the first numbered hardcovers. And again, that adds an extra layer of management and organization in the fulfillment process that you should not underestimate. But to me, I really want this to go big so I can just do I know what I'm doing. This is the way it should have been done in the first place. And we have a much tighter focus on what our fans want and what we can deliver. And just to kind of wrap this up, to go back, because this is the BookFunnel podcast, this is a quintessential BookFunnel example of what to do for a Kickstarter, because we are delivering all the ebooks by BookFunnel, but we are also delivering all the audiobooks by BookFunnel. And Damon just told me 2 weeks ago, which I didn't even know how to do this, he can deliver all 3 of the rock CDs, the digital versions.
Absolutely.
And I've done Kickstarter podcasts and stuff before where people will go, but how are you delivering all this stuff? Because I guess they were sending out MailChimp emails with PDFs in them and stuff. And, that's going to be blocked by most people's emails. And I went, well, don't you know BookFunnel? And we just went through that. So, what your service is, Damon, it is a tool that lets people do Kickstarters like I'm doing. That if I didn't have BookFunnel to deliver all this stuff, I don't know that I'd be running Kickstarters, because just the delivery mechanism would be so insanely difficult that, thank you for helping me do stuff that I want to do. And now, if I can find a way to have BookFunnel deliver all these slip-cased bespoke editions, that would be...
Nope.
Maybe Jack could do. We could ship them to his house and have him package them up and go.
Yeah, right. Jack, get on that.
Right away.
So with that, we will wrap it up. I don't have a better way to wrap it up than what Kevin just said. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate all of your knowledge.
I appreciate it, and I have high hopes for this one, and I got to figure out what the bigger one for the next one to be if I survive this one. But I'm just so happy that a writer can do things that it's the way I see it in my head rather than the way somebody else wants to do it. So it's
Absolutely.
For control freaks everywhere.
Which is the Venn diagram of indie authors and control freaks is basically a circle.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.